Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. We are live on WION World is One. Time now for Dispatch American Joker. Let's begin this broadcast with the headlines. Iran's state news agency says parts of Hormuz Strait will be closed for few hours due to security precautions for shipping safety as Revolutionary Guard Corps conducts Navy drills in the strait. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says that US President Donald Trump will not succeed in destroying the Islamic Republic as talks between the two countries takes place in Geneva. US oil rises over 1% as the US and Iran hold nuclear talks in Geneva. WTI crude rises above $63 a barrel. Brent sits below $69 a barrel. France releases a suspected Russian Shadow Fleet tanker that it had seized last month. The tanker, called Grinch, has been allowed to leave French territorial waters after paying an undisclosed fine. India's IT minister says the country is likely to attract more than $200 billion in investment in artificial intelligence over the next 2 years.
The heavy rains have lashed New Zealand's South Island on Tuesday as a powerful storm system shifted south after battering the capital Wellington. Flooding, landslides and also fallen trees forced road and bridge closures, while a local state of emergency was declared on the Banks Peninsula near Christchurch. The authorities have warned that more downpours could follow. We'll leave you with these images. Thanks for watching.
It's been happening, it happened last year, not as severely, but this is sort of like flash flood. Last year we were a bit more prepared for it, but yeah, no, it's crazy.
At least about 7 people have been critically injured after a massive 60-foot tall chariot overturned in Tamil Nadu's Vellore district. The incident happened during the Mayana Kollai festival, and during the festival the deities from about 10 different villages were decorated and then taken in chariots to the river, and ritual offerings were made. And after the rituals ended at around midnight, a nearly 60-foot tall chariot was being pulled from the riverbank onto the road, where it suddenly lost its balance and then tilted sideways. 10 people who were on the chariot got trapped beneath it, and 7 of them suffered some serious injuries. The police and the local residents then rescued and then sent the injured to nearby government hospital. The district administration has ordered the police to conduct a probe, and the festival committee has also been instructed to ensure that such mishaps do not occur in the future. Although the government rules that states that chariots must not exceed 12 feet in height, chariots from at least about 3 regions in the state each reached about 60 feet in height.
The Pawtucket police received a call at about 2:30 this afternoon that we had an active shooter at Lynch Arena. Upon arrival, police were met with several people obviously inside the arena, and there was 2 casualties within the arena. The suspect was confirmed as one of those casualties. Later on, we learned that another casualty from the shooting was at the hospital, that they succumbed to their injuries after being at the hospital, and there is 3 additional victims at the hospital that all are in critical condition at this time. It appears that this was a targeted event, that it may be a family dispute. We cannot release the names of the victims because obviously we want to speak to the family, make sure that the family is well aware of what happened before we release that information publicly. And we had several people in the building, so we are talking to them. So we're trying to put together the story and the timeline of what happened.
Police in the Bronx were called to break up a crowd of up to 200 unruly teens outside of a mall. Chopper 2 was over Bay Plaza earlier today, where you can see groups of people leaving along with a large police presence. We spoke to an employee at a nearby McDonald's that he says was vandalized during the chaos.
I don't know, it just got crazy out of nowhere. Like a bunch of kids just came in here, it was breaking everything. I don't know, I was scared for my life, man. I got kids at home.
Police say some arrests were made but did not give an exact number or say if any charges were actually filed. Not clear what led to this large gathering either.
Protesters in Philadelphia are speaking out against recent ICE raids in our area and nationwide. Chopper 6 was overhead in Chinatown. This was around 11 o'clock this morning as dozens gathered outside the Philadelphia ICE office. The group held a march calling for an end to raids, detentions, and deportations.
In the quiet rural township of Roxbury, New Jersey, a sprawling warehouse sits at the center of a growing national controversy. Recently leaked documents suggest the federal government is considering leasing the facility as an ICE detention center capable of holding up to 1,500 undocumented migrants prior to deportation.
This is a warehouse. It is designed to house packages and goods, not human beings. So as a result, it does not have suitable water and sewer capabilities to have 1,500 people inside it.
The proposal has sparked recent protests outside the town's largest shopping mall, where activists denounce the plan while other residents voice support, citing security and potential economic benefits.
The immigrants in our community. They work hard. They are lovely families. They go to church. I love them, so I'm here for them.
It scares me because of my color. As an American citizen now, but I have to actually carry passport, birth certificate, immunization records. I've got it all in my purse. But I don't want to sit back and just ignore it either, because I'm just being complicit.
Meanwhile, some of the residents say the facility was an important focal point in establishing better security in the region.
Well, I think that it's a good thing to do, to have it in this area if they need it. I'm not against that type of facility for the ICE detention. I think there's an opportunity to clean up this area in New Jersey. There's a lot of people here that probably are illegally here, and I think that we should stand up for strong borders and not allow illegal aliens to come into the country.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's point man on Thursday announced the end of an aggressive immigration operation in Minnesota that triggered large protests and nationwide outrage following the killing of 2 U.S. citizens.
tarde sale pues. Ahí la gente pincha ahí, ponen la fecha ya, y te lo va diciendo todo. Eso va caminando. Y entonces cuando logré entrar cogí como el 200 y pico, menos mal. 200 y pico, 300 y pico, no me acuerdo ahora bien. Pero bueno, eso fue hace unos días ya y mira, hoy es que me toca. Ahora, como le expliqué, tengo el 7.000 y pico. Dan 50 turnos diarios. ¿Cuándo yo vuelvo a comprar gasolina? Ya eso será para pararme.
Ya estaba preocupada desde ayer porque ayer estaban en el 44 y no me llamaban, entonces mandé a alguien que viniera por aquí no había nadie, me empecé a preocupar, pero no, me entró un mensaje ahorita como a las 10 de la mañana y vinimos para acá, así que todo bien.
Porque es casi que imposible, con 20 litros no se puede. Entonces, bueno, tratamos de resolver, así que esa es la situación que tenemos hoy en día con el tema de la gasolina y el ticket. Sí, está más controlada, pero es muy escasa.
Germany has urged France to boost its defense spending to make European self-sufficiency a reality. European countries are facing pressure to enhance their defense capabilities as anxiety increases about whether Washington would use its military might to come to the aid of its NATO partners. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul, however, said Europe cannot defend itself without the US. Not just that, he highlighted that sticking with the US is the only realistic option and China is not an alternative. Wadephul also had some bad news for Ukraine. The German foreign minister said that Berlin has effectively run out of its own stocks of air defense missiles and can no longer supply them to Ukraine directly from its reserves. He noted that Patriot interceptors that Berlin has come straight off the production line in the US. He added that everything coming off that line is going directly to Ukraine under a mechanism that is largely financed by Europeans and to a large extent by Germany. He urged other countries to contribute more. The Ukraine support report by Kiel Institute for the World Economy shows that while Washington has reduced its contribution by up to 99%, European countries noticeably increased theirs, largely compensating for the shortfall. European military aid rose by 67% above the average for the years 2022 to 2024, while non-military aid increased by 59%. According to the data within Europe, Germany was the largest single donor state in military aid in 2025. Berlin provided over $10.5 billion. In addition to Germany, other major contributors include UK with about $6.5 billion and Sweden with about $4.5 billion. The debate over defense spending and US-Europe ties comes as Ukraine and Russia are meeting in Geneva for a fresh round of US-mediated peace talks. The Kremlin says that talks are likely to focus on land, the main sticking point. We earlier spoke to our correspondent Ross Cullen from Paris, and this is what he told us about
Ukraine, which is facing the next round of talks in the Swiss city of Geneva today. The US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the son-in-law of the president, Jared Kushner, will be there representing the US for these trilateral discussions between Moscow, Kiev and Washington. And we understand that land is still going to be one of the key positions. We've heard Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump say in the past that they do believe 90 to 95% of the issues are solved. It all comes down to these contested areas in the east of Ukraine, land which is recognized by the UN as Ukrainian, which the Russians would like to see Ukraine give up. But Ukraine has suggested potentially it could form part of a demilitarized free economic zone, an idea to try to get the US on board with that. But we do know that speaking on Air Force One on Monday. The US President Donald Trump did say that Ukraine better get to the table pretty fast if it wants to make a deal.
News out of the Middle East, where the Israeli government is tightening its control of the occupied West Bank. The cabinet has approved measures to make it easier for settlers to buy land in the disputed regions. Israeli officials argue that beginning land registration for the first time since 1967 is an essential security measure, but Palestinian leaders are condemning the move, calling it a, quote, de facto annexation of occupied Palestinian territory and labeling it illegal settlement activity. Here to break it all down for us is NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley. He's in Tel Aviv. Matt, good morning. So an Israeli settlement watchdog group called Peace Now said the Israeli measure could lead to the dispossession of Palestinians from up to half of the West Bank. Just what does this measure do? How could it impact the possibility of a two-state solution?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, it's all wrapped up in a lot of legalese and bureaucratic discussion. But the fact is that what this decision does, also with another decision that took place about a week earlier, also not from the full cabinet, but from the security cabinet, so a smaller body, really does do more than any other decision from the Israeli government in several generations to tighten Israeli control over the West Bank. Now, that decision that you're talking about, the most recent one from Sunday, it opens up a land registry. Now, that sounds quite benign, right? Why is everybody up in arms? It basically will mean, according to Peace Now, as you just mentioned, that a huge part of Area C, which is now under full Israeli control, even though Palestinians live there and also provide some services like education and other things. This is military control by the Israelis in these areas. Now, this land registry means, according to Peace Now, that any Palestinian who isn't able to furnish proof that they own their land, that land will automatically go into a land registry and be available either for the state or available for private people to purchase, like Jewish residents here in Israel who want to expand settlements in the West Bank. And again, this comes a week after another set of decisions that also really extended Israeli control over the West Bank and really lengthened the menu of places where Jews here in Israel can purchase land in the West Bank. So we're talking about two decisions, both of which, taken together, really defeat the notion of a two-state solution.
So how is the international community and the United Nations responding to all this?
Well, we've been hearing a lot of statements of concern from European countries and from international groups and organizations, strong condemnation from countries throughout the Middle East. And that's critical because the fact is that the Israelis have kind of gambled their diplomatic relations with their neighbors in order to extend their influence over the West Bank. This idea of annexing the West Bank has long been something that the Gulf countries, the Arab Gulf countries and other neighbors of Israel, many of whom have diplomatic relations, normalized relations with Israel, have said is a red line. And that's why this is such a gamble, because this doesn't actually annex the West Bank. These striking series of decisions just massively increases Israeli control over the West Bank and stops just short of that word annexation, something that President Trump had said he will not allow, in part because he's afraid of inciting the wrath of the Gulf states and preventing the furtherance of his Abraham Accords, which was his main, most important political legacy from his first term, and something that even Israeli politicians are desperate to see happen. They want to see normalized relationships with the likes of Saudi Arabia or Lebanon or Syria. This could really get in the way of that. And so that's one of the reasons why this is such a dangerous move, not just for Palestinians, but for Israelis as well.
A secretive flight, a nuclear reactor, and rising war tensions in the Middle East. Well, the skies over America recently witnessed something extraordinary, something rarely seen and never attempted like this before. And it's happening at a time when global tensions, specifically around Iran, are making the world nervous. Welcome to Times XP. It's me, Dhriti Athri, and we are going to talk about a mission that looked like a routine military flight, but was anything but routine. Well, the operation was carried out by two very powerful arms of the US government, the US Department of Defense and the US Department of Energy. Their goal was to transport one of America's most advanced energy technologies, not by ship or truck, but by air inside a massive military cargo aircraft. That's right. This journey began at a highly secure military location, by the way. The reactor was loaded at Mark Air Reserve Base. From there, it was flown across the US to another strategic military installation Hill Air Force Base. Well, this was not just transportation, it was a test, a demonstration maybe, a signal to the world about the future battlefield energy. Well, the start of this mission, it was a micro-reactor that could change modern warfare. The reactor was built by private American company Valar Atomics, and it is not just any traditional nuclear reactor. It is a micro-reactor, small enough to be transported, powerful enough to supply energy to military bases, flexible enough to operate in remote and hostile environments. Can you think about that for a moment? Military bases in deserts, mountains, conflict zones could soon generate their own electricity without depending on fuel energy lines that enemies often target. But there was one crucial detail. The reactor was transported without any nuclear fuel. Yes, it was completely safe from a radiation perspective. Well, the mission was never about activating the reactor though, it was about proving something else. Can the US quickly move advanced nuclear technology anywhere in the world if needed? And according to the officials, the answer, it appears to be yes. This was not just any technical test, it was also a political and strategic messaging. Two top US leaders personally joined the mission here. America's Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, flew aboard the aircraft, and so did senior Pentagon official Michelle Duffy. Their presence showed how seriously Washington views this technology. They described the mission as a historic step towards making military forces more energy independent and battle ready. But you know why this matters? Because the global conflicts are changing rapidly. Modern warfare is no longer just about tanks or any sort of fighter jet anymore. It's about supply, power supply, communication network, surveillance system and artificial intelligence. All of these depend on reliable electricity. And in war zones, energy supply is often the weakest link, right? Micro-reactors could change that forever. Also, the timing is raising eyebrows here. While tensions involving Iran and the US have been rising again, military experts say that energy independence could give troops a massive advantage during extended overseas deployment. Now, if supply chains collapse, if fuel deliveries are attacked, troops could still operate smoothly. And that is a game-changing possibility. This also shows the bigger shift in global defense strategy, by the way. Well, for decades, nuclear technology was mostly about weapons and large power plants, right? Now the countries are racing to develop compact nuclear energy system, portable, efficient, strategic. And yes, the US wants to lead this new race here. So in the end, the question is what comes next? Officials say that this particular mission is only the beginning. Future tests could involve deploying these reactors to remote military outposts, possibly even conflict zone, possibly even disaster relief operations, because these reactors could provide emergency power to areas where electricity system could collapse. So we have one flight and many global signals.